welcome to How to Podcast. I'm your host, Tom Matt. I am the host of the Tom Matt Show, a radio show that Debbie has been on 33 times. As a matter of fact, we just recorded another episode recently. And today is our very first How to Podcast. I guess we're going to call these episodes, if that's what they are. And what I would like to do is I'm going to interview Dr. Susan Bernstone. Now, Susan and I have not had any discussions about this. This is kind of interesting for me because typically when I do and set up the radio program, I will, there's a little bit of a format that we go through, but with this is actually very interesting for me, and I want to challenge myself to be better at the idea of being creative. And so when you're thinking about a podcast, and you want to polish what you're doing, think about the creativity. We'll talk about the equipment side of things down the road. That's here nor there, I don't think too much, but it's more on the creative side and what makes it interesting. So I'm gonna jump in and I want to introduce our guest today, Dr. Susan Bernstone. I don't have Susan's bio. I know that she's a psychologist and she's a TV host and she seems like a really nice lady. And if she's friends with Debbie, who is our producer for the How to Podcast episodes, then she's got to be cool. And so I'm all about conversation and just having fun with people. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to have fun. And again, if you have questions pertaining to polishing your podcast, getting better, getting over the fear, finding guests, all these different topics that we'll have, we'll talk about those down the road. But make sure you send a little Q&A to Debbie, and we'll run through those in future episodes. I want to welcome to the How to Podcast inaugural. So pleased to be the host for this, Dr. Susan Bernstone. Hi, Susan. How are you?
Hi, Tom. This is great. It's so funny. Not only did we not talk about this topic, but Tom and I have never met before. We are meeting live here. We didn't even have a conversation before this. So, hi, Tom. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm thrilled because after this, I want to talk about your radio show. And, I'm not going to put you on the spot now, but that's a interview that I'd love to have with you, with me interviewing you actually about your radio show.
Okay, well, that's cool. I tell you what, let's drive it that way. Let's go with it because as Susan and I, and this is a new format for us, everybody. And this is the thing about How to Podcast. When you're going to share information, think about podcasts as a stream of information, okay? It's a really cool way of getting ideas out there and meeting people and doing cool things. And it's like Susan and I just met Susan at the gym, and we're going to talk about working out. We're going to talk about doing things, something like that. So Susan, let's talk.
Well, it's interesting. I was telling Debbie earlier today, I can share my story. I took a podcasting class. I want to say maybe 5 years ago. Maybe it was sooner, but it was several years ago. And I took it where I take a lot of my production classes, and that's it. I'm in actually Brooklyn, New York.
Okay, you're in Brooklyn. Okay, so because I'm in Holt, Michigan, Lansing, Michigan. So right. Here we go with the technology thing. So we got through that. Okay, awesome. And
so where I'm going to just do a plug for BRIC and Brooklyn Free Speech, where it's the public access station, and it's also really a whole corporation, nonprofit. They offer podcasting classes, lots of different classes, video classes. So the short version is I was doing my television show there, Your Voice with Dr. Susan, and then I took the very first podcast course. And I think your viewers, you will appreciate this. So although I had been doing my television show, and I took the episodes and also made those into a podcast, but what I did for my first podcast class was I was taking this class, and I was a student. We needed material. So that night, after my first class, I was in Brooklyn, went into a restaurant and said, guys, I am taking a podcast class. I need people to talk to. Literally, that's what I did. And
why doesn't that not surprise me?
Right. And that's what I did. And you know what? It was really amazing because I got people to talk about things. And I'm a therapist, but I was totally out of my therapist hat because I didn't want to be a therapist. I just wanted to ask people questions. So I did, and I said, what was the best advice you ever got? So I got about 5 different people to give me unbelievable, on-the-spot interviews in different restaurants. We'll talk about equipment another time. And then I love the creative part. So somebody told me a story about being on the Cyclone. I went that night.
What is the Cyclone? Is that like a?
The Cyclone it's a roller coaster. It's a very roller coaster in Brooklyn. So I was so into this. I went and I got the sound effects, because you'll learn that when you're doing a podcast, what's so important is the sounds, right? And you can be really creative. So I went all excited with my equipment, my little thing, and I got and taped the sound of the roller coaster, the sounds of the rides. And, this was a whole weekend workshop. I was immersed in it. I got all my stuff. I went through the translations. I did it, and I put it together. And I did the editing, actually, for it, because it was part of the podcasting class was doing the editing. And I sat, and it was amazing. And it was a lot of fun. I can share it with the viewers another time. But so that's it. It's really just going out there and having fun with it. And we put it together, and it was great. It was great.
See, and then this is where this is going to be very interesting, because my journey into radio and podcasting, because I always wanted to be in radio, Susan, and for the listeners and the people that are on the class today, feel free to jump in here with Debbie as our producer. But I have never done any editing myself. I have never had professional training like this. I'm just a talker. I do a lot of reading. I'm very into the conversational side of things. And I have a producer who is on the payroll, everybody. So you're getting this couple different ways of doing this. And I like what Susan's saying, because it gives us an opportunity to think about different ways of doing the same thing. And that's where we have to be creative. And I like the thought of this. And it's like the sounds and the B-roll, that's so interesting to me. And it's like, wow, that's really cool. And so when you take a class like that, I'm thinking, wow, this is kind of like what we're doing here with the class and with bringing people in and having fun and having a conversation. That's the whole point of putting together a podcast. It's like finding cool people, having a conversation, and asking them, what do they do? We're the facilitator. As a host, I'm the facilitator for this thing, and Susan's feeding me information. And voila, in about 30 seconds, she gave us like 4 nuggets of great stuff. Susan, tell us a little bit more about yourself. And this is something else that people want to, when you do your podcast, you want to make sure that the listeners know who you're talking to. Now, when I do radio, it's a little bit different. With a podcast, I'm going to still want the guest to say who they are and why are you interesting and what's going on with your life. So go ahead, Susan.
Okay, so I'm Dr. Susan, and I am in Brooklyn, New York, as I mentioned before. So we are heavily in the middle of the pandemic here in New York City. I have been in the field of mental health, psychological health, behavioral health, relationship health, and spiritual health for over 35 years. And I am a clinical social worker. I have my PhD in clinical social work. And so
you're really a smart lady.
Well, I don't know about that, but I went through a lot of education and training, but I love talking to people. And I always wanted to do media work, but I went into the route of therapist and I did agency work, but I always had this interest. And my dream was to have a television talk show and a radio show.
And you do.
And so finally one day I went, oh, what am I waiting for? If not now, then when? So fast forward, I did my television talk show a few years ago. I went about it. I wouldn't really recommend the way I did it, but I'm the kind of person that likes to know everybody's job so that I can help when needed. So I took every class there was on production. So I know a little bit to be dangerously question people, but I'm not the expert. And I want to, what's important is to think about what you want to be doing. But I'll talk about that a little bit more. Let me just stick with me. So I also teach psychology. And right now, I enjoy both doing the therapy part, but I love doing interviews. and I love just giving information away. I love the conversation. So I love having conversations with people.
Okay. So hold on. Let me stop you here because I want to go back and see. I'm in my radio mode, and I'm just going to stay in my radio mode because that's how I do it. Everybody, I'm not going to come in here and try to be something different than what I have been doing for almost 10 years on radio. And what we do is turn my radio show into a podcast. So it's radio. It started as radio show first and podcast second. Now the podcast is sort of, yes.
We have a question for you, speaking about that.
Okay, go ahead, Deb.
One of our listeners typed a question to me and asked, can you ask Tom how he first began podcasting and how he really got into it? And I heard you were moving in that direction, but I wanted you to be able to address the whole thing for our listener. Okay,
well, it's a long kind of a convoluted story, everybody, but I wrote a book. And in a short answer, because I'm playing with the chat thing here, and this is all new sort of to me in doing the show this way, which is really interesting, and I'm finding this very fun because it's different, and I like to grow and improve on this whole thing. Anyways, back to this question.
Well, but Tom, what's different? And maybe you can address that too. Like, what is the difference between for you right now, what you're doing, and the radio show?
Well, the biggest thing is the video. I mean, the video to me, I've always been a little afraid of the video just being distracting. See, what I've got going here right now, everybody, and I'll get back to the question here in a second. I take these notes and I write bullets down all over the place. It's just the way I do it. And I'll always refer back. And that's one thing, a tip that I would give to you is write down little key words that your guest or your friend that you're talking to is saying. Like, for example, I've written down 5 years ago, podcast, Brooklyn, curious, cyclone, sounds, B-roll, enjoy, conversation, what am I waiting for, learn to podcast, psychologist, TV host, Susan's name. Because believe me, when I first started, I got a guest name wrong. And I'll tell you what, that was the most embarrassing thing ever. You don't want to do that. Okay, so back to the question. And thank you, Susan, for your question on the, what's different. It's just, I haven't done a pre-show call with you, and I haven't explained to you the format because I'm learning the format as we're doing it. So that's the whole thing about growing. When I started, there was two guys that were starting this online radio network 10 years ago called FTNS. And I was just trying to find somebody to help me promote my book. I had a coach that I was paying, and I had written one book. I had just finished graduate school as a non-traditional. For you younger students, that means I was the old guy in class. And so I wanted to promote my book. And so I connected with this guy on LinkedIn and found the groups. My coach turned me on to doing the group thing. And we had a conversation sort of like this. He called me on the phone, and I'm just trying to get an interview. I just wanted to promote my dang book. And he said, I think you have what it takes to be a host. We're looking for a baby boomer, because I'm a younger boomer, baby boomer fitness guy. And I'm a trainer. And so it's like, okay. And so that was how the whole thing started. I was on 3 days a week for an hour. I had no idea how we were going to do this. I said, how are we going to do this? And they said, we're going to do it via Skype, just like we're doing with Zoom right now. I use Zoom now for the radio show that I record. I have a program on my computer here. This computer that I'm speaking on is Audition, and I'm not recording it right now. And then what I do is I save the files to Dropbox, and my producer, Ezra, he puts the sound beds behind everything. And basically, the radio stations do what they do. We barter off the time. I'm on the Michigan Talk Network, and it just takes time. It's just the key thing to this whole deal is having fun. Find interesting people and sort of get to know them and have a conversation with them. So that's the long story, long answer to a very good question. And I hope that as we do more of this, people will post up the question. Now, Debbie, let me ask you, Deb, because this is our first time, everybody, so it's sort of new to Susan and I, and Susan and I will probably be doing more talking down the road because she's a very gregarious woman, as you can tell. But, I mean, Debbie, I can't see the question. And so Debbie's producing the episode for us in this live format. And I don't do my show like this. When we do my show, it's recorded. We record it. We don't edit it, but it's recorded and we have segments. For this episode and this show or this podcast, this is about learning the ropes and how we're going to go about this. Now, Susan, let me ask you a question. If you had a tip, you've done the class. If you were starting off and you were going to answer that question for the, Debbie, you didn't tell me the name of the person who asked the question, not that it matters, but if you were going to answer that question, what would be a short answer, because we're going to run out of time here. We're on a 20-minute window. And that's another thing, everybody. Be aware of your clock, because in radio, you're on a very tight clock. And so you want to make sure that you're not being like long-winded like I just was and didn't give my guest a chance to talk. So Susan, why don't you give us, and prompt them, coach them along and tell them don't think that Susan knows what the hell is going on in my head right now, because she has no idea. We've never met. I mean, we're just now talking. So Susan, give you a direction. Give me a short answer.
Now, give me the question again. It was because for you.
How did you start in your podcasting? How did you start in television?
So as I had said before, so I took some classes, had my show.
How did you find the class?
Through a friend told me about this institution in Brooklyn.
Okay.
And the interesting thing was for me, I think, now I want to clarify something, Tom, because when you're using podcast, are you thinking of both visual and audio or just audio?
Just audio, strictly audio. Okay. Now, I'm going to probably change that because, as everybody knows now, I'm a huge fan of Joe Rogan. I listen to just maybe 2 or 3 podcasts, and I'm very picky about Joe Rogan's guests because he has a lot of like performers and stuff that I could care less about. But I want to know about the science stuff. I like the science stuff. I like the medical stuff. I like the fitness stuff. I like the nutrition stuff. I want the sciencey, how do you live a quality of life stuff. So I'm always, but Joe Rogan, come to find out that 40% of his listeners watch his episodes on YouTube. And so I have never done it this way. And so as I was telling Debbie, I need to test my throughput in my computer because we're getting ready to move. So I'm going to move my studio. I have a studio here in my home, which is like this big empty room now because we're moving. But it's like, so no, I do not do video, but I would like to down the road because I think people, and let me ask the younger people that are part of the lesson, do you prefer the video versus the audio? Because me, I like listening. I think you can multitask with a podcast rather than watching a video, but perhaps you enjoy that. I don't know, but I don't watch Joe Rogan. I listen.
So we're waiting for the kids to see if there's anybody on answering that?
I don't know. I mean, we're just letting it go.
We're getting an answer coming through. So hold on, the person's typing.
Right.
See, so this is how this is going to be pretty cool because Debbie's kind of like in the background and her and I have this really strong relationship. And it's like, I want to meet all of the mentors in the program. And I want to be able to share just episodes of like what's going on with you, and maybe some tips will come up on the podcast. Maybe they won't. Maybe it'll be like, hey, just be yourself and be relaxed and be curious. I mean, isn't that a good point? I mean, Susan, isn't it like the creativity and being curious? It's like the reading. It's like when I find guests, I'm always trolling for guests. And so that's kind of that's the way I do it.
When I meet people, I can meet anybody, and I'm always like, "This is a great story. Will you come on my show?"
Exactly.
Like, I can go to a movie, and the guy that's taking the ticket, I get into a conversation. I'm like, "Oh my God, I have this show. Your story is so interesting. People want to hear. Will love this story. I want to interview you."
Right. So that's okay. For example, everybody, we're waiting for Debbie to come back.
I have the answer here.
Okay, go ahead.
For you. So here's just another issue, though. If people call in on a phone, they can't use the chat. So we're in the new, coronavirus era where we're all doing these interviews differently than would normally happen.
Right.
But So if a person is on a phone, they have to dial in their question a different way. So here it is. The person says, I prefer video, but I do listen as well. I both watch and listen to the Michael K. show. Both interest me, but a visual is always a plus.
Okay.
Cool.
That makes me think that I want to do more of this, and maybe I talk to Susan about the video stuff. I don't, personally, because I'm in my own comfort zone, I have never done it that way, but I'm not opposed to doing it. Debbie and I have done a few of these, and now she's doing some editing with this stuff, I think. And I mean, you record it and you just put it up and away we go. I don't know. I mean, that's the whole thing, everybody. We're going to figure it out as we go. And I think that through the learning process of helping me get better, it's going to help you get better, because I'm learning. I'm not here just to be Mr. Expert. I want to be Mr. Help you be facilitator. I work in higher education at Michigan State University. I want to help you with your education. So for the takeaway for today's episode with Susan, I would say two things: have fun and be curious. I mean, like Susan has said multiple times already, everybody has a story, and have your radar open. And this is where having conversation with people, making eye contact with people when you're out there. If you're reading a book, don't be afraid to reach out to someone that you read an article about and say, hey, I do a podcast. Would you like to be a guest? Never be afraid to try, because I have gotten some of the biggest people. I mean, I don't know how many of you know who Joe Rogan is, but I've cherry picked some of his guests, and these people are like, I mean, there's like 5 million downloads of this show weekly. And so it's like, and they've been on my radio show. It's like, okay. I mean, I have no fear. You cannot have fear. If you're going to be in the media and you want to share your ideas, then why would you be afraid? I mean, it's fun. It's like, this is good stuff. I love doing this kind of stuff. It's fun meeting new people and having conversations with Susan. Isn't that right, Susan?
Yeah, and I want to add, even if you do have fear, do it anyway. This is the therapist in me coming out. There are a lot of people that go into media that have fears, and they do it anyway. And you would be shocked at how many of the personalities that you see on TV and radio that get ridiculously anxious right before they're about to go live.
As you should. And here's the thing, like when I do public speaking, and I want to build on my public speaking career, post Rona, I guess you say. But if you don't have a little bit of apprehension, like today when we started, not that I was nervous, but I'm like, okay, how's this going to go? And it's like, I just trust Debbie. I figured that, I have trust in this thing, and I just don't, there's a little bit of trepidation there, but that puts you in that good kind of stress, that eustress, right? Isn't that right, Susan? I mean, eustress is a good thing.
Yep, excitement. It's also excitement, right?
Right. I mean, it drives you to be more on top of your game and be ready. So don't come into it half-assed. If you're not feeling it, then don't do it. I mean, because it's going to sound like crap, and you don't want to put out bad. Here's the thing. You want to have good audio first. You want to have, if you're going to do video, it's got to be better. I don't know that much about the video, so you guys, maybe you're going to help me get better at the video, but I am an audio file freak with my show. If we don't have a good connection, it ain't happening. So bring your A game every damn time. Do not come into this lackadaisical, unprepared. That is disrespectful to your guest. And if you're going to do that, or your listeners, respect your listeners. Always carry respect in your heart. And if you do, come into it thinking you're going to learn something, because that's the way I like to do it. I've told guests many times on my radio show that as a non-traditional student at Michigan State in my master's program, I went to office hours a lot because graduate school was hard as hell. And I was an older guy, so I went to office hours. Well, my radio show I describe it as the same thing as office hours. It's going in, having a conversation with a smart person and learning something. That's it. I mean, don't overthink the thing. Have something you want to learn. I wanted to meet Susan. I want to learn how this whole process is going to work for Debbie, because I know Debbie's a winner. I want to be part of her team. And so whatever it takes, I'll show up. I want to do my piece. and everybody shows up and does their piece. What do you think, Susan? We're going to wrap this thing
And
up here.
Tom, I just want to make an additional point. Like, since you come from radio and you have a set way, that's your strength. And your podcast, you want to go with and follow what you do. Now, for other people, their podcast might be very different.
Exactly.
So, for instance, one of the most famous podcasts that was listened to was the show called Serial. And that was all about, a murder and the unfolding of a murder. So there's lots of different ways to do it. And one of the good pieces of advice that I got is to, listen to two things. One is listen for what you enjoy in a podcast. So as you're listening to the different podcasts, what are you enjoying? What do you like about it? And start really zooming in on that.
Right. That's very, very, very good advice.
And the other piece is, what do you want to do? And what are you good at? So, Tom, you're great at talking and great at interviewing. Other people might be really good. You're welcome. Other people might be really good at talking about music or being a critic for movies or telling jokes. So their format could be really different.
Oh yeah, for sure. And that's the whole thing. And I think that coming down the road, Susan, sorry to interrupt you, but it's, I think that you could have a 5-minute podcast, you guys, if you wanted to do a review on a game, if you wanted to do a review on a book, maybe you don't want to interview someone. Maybe it's just you talking about a song that makes your heart. I have a woman who I coached who sent me an email this week, and she said, you encouraged me to do this thing. I mean, I had a meeting with her 4 years ago, and she's doing these 3-minute podcasts, and it's really very nice. It's it's a good and you're in and out, and that's I found it to be very entertaining. Will I subscribe to it? Probably not, because I only have a limited space where I don't use time. I have space. I'm very choosy with where I go, but it's Susan, you're spot on. Find the things that you like to do, listen to those, and cherry pick the hell out of everything that they're doing that you like. What did you like about our conversation today, you guys? What did you like about what Susan and I were doing? Because this was a freewheeling, we had no direction at all with any of this stuff pre-recording. And that's the way it's going to be. And I kind of like that. It's different for me. And I think it's going to help me grow as a host. And I like meeting people. It's like Susan. Susan likes to meet people, and now we're friends. So there you go. So make a new friend and have a good time doing a podcast. And I don't know what our time is, but I know that it's supposed to be a half an hour, and we're getting close to that. So Susan, you got anything you want to finish with?
Well, Tom, I just want to underscore something you said in a different way, meaning that you just called it, you don't have time, you have space. And I have to say, I love that. I love that you just said that you make space instead of time. And that's a great analogy.
Well, it's a choice.
I like it. I like it a lot.
I learned the thing about time from a psychologist, guy named Gay Hendricks, Dr. Gay Hendricks, who is a pretty famous guy, it turned out. I read his book, The Big Leap. And I would recommend that. It's an easy read. He's been on Oprah. He's been on Dr. Phil. He's big. He's an older guy, does very few interviews. And he had a chapter in his book about time. And time is all about choices. Time is not about, I don't have time, or when I get time, or any of that nonsense. No, that's not it at all. It's all about choices. I was in the middle of something today. I had a reminder from Debbie on my calendar. It hit my phone. It's because we're prepping this house to go. I was oh, I got to go. I have to go do Debbie's thing. I'm going to jump in the shower really quick and get up here and do it because I wanted to do this. You have to want to do this. Set up your time and your space and where you're going, and understand that you're going to get better, and it's fun, and just enjoy it. So enjoy the ride, because life is short, and we can get into more and more of the depth of who I am and down there, and we probably will at some point.
Oh, we will. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
Debbie, anything else?
No, just one comment from a listener who said that they got what they were looking for from this, and that they liked it and learned.
Good. That's the whole point. It's very simple, you guys. We want to try to keep this with Debbie driving, with me, with guests like Susan or whomever is going to be next week. We're going to be here every Friday at 5:30 Eastern time. So I'm looking forward to having this regular half an hour chat or 20-minute podcast, and away we go. So I want to be respectful of Susan's time, Debbie's time, my time. So I think we're ready to stop the recording.